Welcome to the Texas Conflict Coach radio program. If you have ever experienced or engaged in destructive or unresolved conflict, then you know it leads to broken relationships, distrust, and damaging results. Our program will help you manage and resolve conflict effectively with strategies, valuable resources, and support. I am your host, Patty Porter. My guest hosts, Zena Zumeta and Stephen Kotev, along with our guest experts, will share our experiences, raise your awareness, and give you food for thought. We will share with you problem-solving strategies no matter what your situation is. At work, with neighbors or friends, family, and with partners. Tune in or join in the conversation every Tuesday evening.
Welcome, everyone. This is Zena Zumeta, your guest host. Today, our program is called Managing Conflict in Your Blended Family. The program is part of the May series on fights, misunderstandings, and disagreements. Raising children in a blended family can be challenging, frustrating, and overwhelming at times. It can be a real test of endurance to manage to stay together through some of the tough times that can erupt with your stepchildren. It can also be a time of growth and lasting relationships. Believe it or not, conflict is actually an opportunity to teach your children, step and biological, values and skills to last a lifetime. Our guests tonight are Marney Studaker-Cordner and Kim Abraham. They are licensed child and family therapists, practicing for over 20 years. Specializing in children with severe emotional and behavioral disorders, Kim and Marney are published authors in the areas of parenting and codependency. They both have personal experience with the step-parenting and blended families as well. Welcome to the program, Kim and Marney.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're happy to be here.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Yeah, we're delighted to have you. So what got both of you interested in the area of step-parenting conflict? And Kim, why don't you start?
Well, my interest began actually on a personal level as the biological parent of an oppositional defiant child, and having a lot of conflict with my own child got me interested in developing some techniques that I could use personally with him to just avoid those conflicts. And then later, he wasn't very old. He was about 7 when I remarried. So then there was the blended family issue, and my husband became the new stepfather of a very defiant stepson, so my techniques kind of broadened from there, and my interest became, trying to find things that would work to solve some of those conflicts in our home. At that time, I was also practicing as a therapist at different mental health agencies, one of which was Child and Adolescent Services, so I specialized in the work with children and families, and kind of gravitated toward really having an interest in working with those difficult kids and helping families find techniques that would help solve those issues and help find some harmony within their homes.
Oh, that's wonderful. And Marney, how about you? What got you interested?
Very similar to Kim, both professional and personal. A little bit different as I was actually the step-parent. I started out as a child and family therapist working with blended families, and 16 years ago I married a man with 3 children who were 7, 9, and 11 years old at the time. And I'm an only child and didn't have any children of my own at the time, so not only was step-parenting new to me, any kind of parenting in my personal life was new to me. So because I'm a therapist, and I knew that there were unique issues with blended families, I did some reading on the topic, and my husband and I attended a few counseling sessions as a way of making sure we understood our expectations and roles before we became a full-fledged family. And as the kids got older, they all eventually lived with us through adolescence. So I experienced both the weekend and midweek visitation schedule as a step-parent, and also my husband having full custody of the children as well. So we had some living arrangements that varied throughout the years.
Wow. So both of you really had both sides of this issue in your personal lives, and then also in your professional lives were dealing with it. That's terrific. So
Yeah.
how would you describe the challenges and dynamics between step-parents and stepchildren? For example, what are some of the frictions? And Marney, do you want to begin?
Sure. I think one of the most difficult challenges is the fact that step-parents often have most or even all of the responsibilities that come with parenting, but actually none of the rights that biological parents have. For example, I often drove my stepkids to school and picked them up, but the school did not recognize me as a parent, and actually on several occasions made that quite clear to me that I did not have any rights with regard to my stepkids, yet I did have a lot of the responsibility. And so defining those roles of rights, responsibilities, and boundaries, I think is a unique challenge for step-parents that isn't quite the same with biological parents.
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear that about the schools, though. So they were really making the distinction between the step-parent and the parent.
So. Very much so.
And I
on
remember,
several occasions,
I know that
on several occasions, I would take them, even to a doctor visit if my husband had to work, but I was not allowed to sign for anything.
Yeah. Well, legally, I guess that makes sense, but it really puts you in a tough position. I know that you have said that you heard the phrase, "But you're not the real parent."
Yes.
That must have really hurt.
Yes, many times, and often I think people who don't have that firsthand experience really don't know what it means to be a step-parent, obviously. And the phrase to me is a perfect example of the challenges to step-parenting. I mean, what is a real parent? Is it based on blood, love? What defines being a real parent? Does it mean that the step-parent doesn't or can't love that child the same way or to the same degree as a biological parent? Many step-parents make sacrifices for their stepkids financially or with their time and give of their heart. And isn't that what a real parent does? And I think often what people mean when they say this is you don't have the inherent authority of a biological parent. You don't have the authority to discipline, to give permission for things, even as simple as attending a field trip. Basically, you aren't in the role of being able to make those major decisions for the child. And it's a fine line and balancing between guiding a child that lives in your home or as part of your family and understanding that the ultimate authority and final say rests with the biological parents. And that can cause serious conflict in a marriage if both spouses don't have the same expectations and understanding of those roles and boundaries.
Right. So both between the spouses and between the parents and the children, it sounds like that can cause conflict.
Yes.
So, Kim, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to this.
Yes. The question was the conflicts? Was it the conflicts between the step-parent?
Just in terms of the responsibility and being the real parent at this point.
The responsibilities and being the real parent,
but when you're not the real parent,
right?
Yeah, your husband was certainly in that position as well. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely, right. And one of the differences between my family and Marnie's family, Marnie was told a lot of times that she wasn't the real parent by a lot of outside people, the schools and the doctors. My husband was told, "You're not the real parent" by my defiant son. And he would tell him that quite often. Anything that my husband would ask him to do as a step-parent, my son would turn around and say, "You're not my dad. You can't tell me what to do." And so, we had a lot of that going on in our house. And so that was really difficult. A lot of feelings were hurt. And, there were times that, quite frankly, my husband didn't like my son. And honestly, my son didn't like him either. Well, it started out that my son didn't like him, and that was why my son treated him that way. And it wasn't that he didn't like him as a person. He didn't really like the situation. And then he took it out on him and really believed he really didn't like him. But what he didn't like was the situation that there was another person coming in married to his mother. And I think, there's a lot of feelings kids go through. They're angry, they're hurt, they're kind of jealous. Their mom's got, someone else now. There was a while that I was single, so the boys just had me. So when someone else came into my life, they didn't like that either, that my attention was now being divided between them and another person. And so with all of that, he just made the decision without giving my husband a chance at all. I don't like him. I remember several times saying, you don't even give him a chance to know him. Nope, I don't like him. And so we had a lot of those conflicts in the beginning that were very, very difficult and a lot of hurt feelings on my husband's part. And I have to say he did quite well, very well, in not lashing out back at my son, but that was because he had me, and as a therapist, I would coach him, that, listen, this isn't because it's you personally, it's the situation. He's not happy with the situation. And so kind of take a step back and understand that there's a lot of feelings driving what he is saying to you. And it's hurt, it's jealousy, it's anger about the situation. He would really prefer that his dad and I be together, and that's not going to happen, but he hasn't moved past that idea yet. And so with all of that in mind, my husband did quite well with that. And hopefully, maybe later in the interview, there'll be a time that I can share, too, how this ended up with my son and my husband.
Yeah, I definitely want to find out about that. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Good. So, Marney, could you talk a little bit about, I know that Kim was referring to them, but could you talk a little bit about the feelings and the emotions of the step-parent in this situation?
Oh, yes. Kim is exactly right. And any parent is going to experience, the whole gamut of emotions, and that certainly includes step-parents, feeling scared, angry, hurt, insecure, and happy. My stepchildren, and every situation is different. Sometimes there are good times and a lot of joy, and that happens in different situations. Some it may be very fleeting and not very often, but all the emotions that go along with parenting. And as Kim mentioned, I think some parents worry because they don't feel love or even like toward their stepchild, and that can cause a step-parent to feel very guilty. Why isn't this coming naturally? Why isn't this happening? Why don't I feel the way I think I should feel? And the fact is that at any given time, any child can be rather unlikable, even our biological children.
True.
And there are times, I love my biological child, but there's sometimes I'm not really digging on her too much. And I think it's important not to expect too much of yourself and to recognize that emotions aren't necessarily right or wrong, but they can clue us into whether or not we need to be making some changes. And, for example, if you're feeling resentful or insecure, taking a look at what that's about, because it will affect your home and your family and your marriage, and ultimately, finding a way to get some insight into how you're feeling about things.
Yeah. And then, Kim, as the biological parent, you're kind of caught in the middle, too. What does that feel like?
Absolutely. And that's exactly what it feels like. You're in the middle, and you're being torn, because you love both. You love your husband or your wife, and you love your children. And so you're watching the two people, or, the set of two people that you love most in this world fight and in conflict, and not happy at times. And what you want is for them all to be happy. That's what we want. And when they're not, it's so frustrating. You feel frustrated. You feel torn. You don't know how to help either one of them, really, because it's really between them to kind of move through. So, you're kind of stuck in the middle, but yet it's up to them to navigate through this. And I learned that because the more that I would try to kind of intervene, the worse I would make the situation, because then I became, they're just going to all run to me. I'm just going to be the person who is always stopping the conflict or trying to find a solution, and then they're never going to figure it out, and I would just make it worse. So really, they had to find a way to navigate through it, and I had to just kind of watch it, but it's painful at times, very painful. And as Marney said, too, there were happy times, too. There were good times, and I think the good times, they were wonderful and great, but then when that conflict hit again, it was almost just, so disappointing. It was like, oh, no, here we are again, and are we ever going to actually make it through this? So, yeah.
Well, what
guilt,
are some of the conflicts?
Guilt that you can't, the guilt, too, that you can't help them, either side to make this work or help them feel better. So, yeah, there was a lot of guilt, too.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, so can you describe some of the conflicts that happened between the spouses, between step-parents and their spouses? And, Kim, I think you were going to start this one.
Well, yeah, one of the things that we had some issues with was, like, the discipline. That was a big issue, because if my husband tried to actually do any of the discipline, that was going to be just like a consequence kind of thing. Like if, for instance, if you don't take care of your dishes, then, you're grounded. That never seemed to work. And again, we're talking, I had a oppositional defiant son. But he would just go to the, no, you can't stop me, you're not my parent, and, it was just it was very difficult. And then my son would come to me. You can't let him tell me what to do. He's not my parent. So again, I would be put in the middle. But he can tell you, he's still an adult, and, we would have just this big thing going on. So there was a lot of conflict with that, but my husband and I actually came up with a solution to that. We found a solution that worked well for him, and it worked well for me, and it worked for my son because he couldn't get around it. So what we did, what we did is Bob took care of what he could control, which was, if Nathan did things like not take care of his dishes, or if Bob asked him, to pick his things up out of the yard and he wouldn't do it, the next time Nathan would ask for something, for Bob to give him a ride, or, hey, can I borrow your hammer? Bob would say, Nathan, I really like to loan you my hammer, or I really like to give you rides, but I got to say no this time. And it's because the last time I asked you to do something for me, you didn't respect my wishes, and, I can't do this for you. But I like to do this for you, so I hope I can do it for you soon. And, my son got rather sick of that after a while, because my husband stuck right to it. I mean, he just stuck to it. And after a while, my son got tired of it, and he didn't do stuff all the time, but there were times I would see he would give in and go ahead and do it, because he knew next time I asked for something, it's going to be no. So, and Nathan couldn't run to me, because Bob can tell him no of any of those things, because it wasn't that he was trying to control Nathan, my son, he was controlling himself. I'm choosing not to do this for you. I'm choosing not to loan this to you, or I'm choosing not to do these extras for you, and I can choose that. That's under my control.
Yeah. Well, let me just let people know that you are listening to the Texas Conflict Coach radio program. We invite you to follow us on Blog Talk Radio, and I am speaking with Kim Abraham and Marney Studaker-Cordner about managing conflict in your blended family. So, Marney, can you talk a little bit about the conflicts between step-parents, and then what works to resolve those conflicts between the spouses around step-parenting?
Yeah, and Kim has really touched on, I think, what can be the heart of it, and it's making sure that you're, we often say, well, are you on the same page? A lot of parents sometimes will hear that, are you on the same page? Are you on the same parenting page? And I think even just being aware of what expectations each of the parents have, because my husband and I had to have a very serious conversation about that. And it's one of the things that I think Kim and I both do with blended families we work with is, what are the expectations here? Because if you have a biological parent who is expecting, you know what, I mean, hey, this is my kid, and my husband or wife needs to be able to discipline. You know, I expect you to ground him. Mm-hmm. And you have a step-parent who's feeling like, I don't want to do that. I'm not comfortable with that. Why should I be disciplining him? If you don't discuss that and make sure you have, you know, the same expectations, the same understanding of that role, it's going to inherently cause some conflict, and you're going to continue to butt heads. And so definitely making sure that everyone understands and that the child understands, you know, who is, you know, if you have a step-parent who's saying, well, I'm going to, you know, it's natural for me to be able to ground this child. This child lives in my home. You know, if you're disrespectful to me, I should be able to ground you. But the biological parent is saying, no, you don't have that inherent authority. The child is going to be confused. What's going on here? And so for everyone to be on the same page and have the same expectations and understanding, I think goes a long way, and I think very similar to what Kim talked about.
So it sounds like communication between spouses is really what's important, and even being aware of what your expectations are is probably
absolutely. And depending on the child too, you know, it's definitely depending on the child, because some kids may appreciate a step parent who is actively engaged in grounding and providing consequences. They may look at that like, you know, this step parent really loves me and is really part of the family and is really stepping up to parent me. And so, like Marney said, I think the key is sitting down and really having a deep conversation with your spouse and evaluating what type of children you have. Because if you have a child like my oppositional defiant child, it's not going to work. Then you have to get really creative and do some of the things like we did. But if you have a child who is, you know, fairly compliant, they may look at, if you're not providing consequences, why not? You know, why aren't you? Are you just not part of the family, or you're just kind of not really my stepdad? Or, you know, the child might be expecting that you're going to discipline just like the mom. So every family is going to be different, and you're really going to need to, you know, understand what type of child you have and what's going to work best in your home.
So does that involve experimentation? Does it involve sitting down and talking with the kids? What does it involve?
I don't think that I would actually sit down and talk with them. I think that, you know, I think parents kind of have a clue. Just kids usually will talk, too, to you. I mean, if a step-parent enforces a consequence and that child doesn't run right to the other parent and say, he's not my parent, he can't do that, or she can't do that, she grounded me, she's not my mother, then, you know, maybe it's okay. Maybe that works. Maybe they just see, hey, this is how family, you know. So, you know, I caution about bringing the kids into it just because you're kind of giving them, you know, how should we discipline you kind of thing. You know, I don't know about that. But I think that, you know, families usually can, you know, feel out their kids pretty well, or just experiment and see how that works out. And if it doesn't, then change course.
And so what you're saying is that observation really is the key, really looking at what's going on around you.
Absolutely. Well, sure.
Yeah. And so when you talk about empowering the step-parent or the control the step-parent has, what can empower a step-parent? And Kim, do you want to start?
I think, you know, for me, just letting Bob know that it wasn't him, especially if kids have nasty things to say or they're treating the step-parent in a bad way, letting that step-parent know that it isn't them personally, that it really is the situation. You know, the kid hasn't adjusted to the situation yet, and so to help them not personalize the situation and to also help them understand that just as they, as the step-parent, are going through all the emotions that they're going through with trying to kind of navigate through this new blended family situation, so are the kids. The kids are too. And this is hard for them too. And kids will act out. They act out their nervousness. They act out their anxieties. And sometimes it's with really nasty behaviors. And so if you don't personalize it, but just look at, this is a kid who isn't comfortable right now, because that's why people act out. If you wake up in the morning and you're just happy, then you don't act out. So when you're acting out, there's something causing some negative energy in you. And with blended families, that's going to happen because there's a lot of changes going on. There's a lot of hurt that's already taken place. Parents have already divorced. Kids have already lost their parents being together. Now another parent's coming into the situation, maybe even some other children who that parent now, their parent is going to have some other children that they're showing love to. There's so many different things that these children have to adjust to. It provokes a lot of anxiety, hurt feelings, anger, jealousies, all of those things. So if you can constantly remind yourself that it's the situation and there's a lot of feelings going on that's provoking all of this acting out, I need to not take it personally, understand it, and just try to handle it in a way that this child knows that I care about them, that I care about their feelings, and that I care about them, and that I hope that this works out.
That's great. And Marney, do you want to talk about what allowed you to feel empowered?
Yeah. Well, there were a couple of things. For me, and every situation is unique, but in my case, one of the things that helped me was remembering what my intention was. And I use that with parenting, whether it's my biological child or my stepkids. What is my intention here? And my husband would often remind me especially during the adolescent years, whenever I got frustrated, all you can do is, show the kids guidance and consistency and that you care. And if they don't get it right now, they will someday. You're showing them what can be, whether they see that right now or not, as an adolescent, you're giving them consistency, you're giving them guidance, you're showing them what your intention is. And my intention was to be loving, to, raise them in a way with values, to show them what my values were in this life. And he was right. In the end, it paid off. And kind of keeping my eye on the long term and what I hoped that they took from having me in their life. And remembering also that for empowerment, why I chose to become a part of that family. And it was love. I loved my husband. Did I love my stepkids the moment I met them? Of course not. It doesn't work that way. I didn't love my husband the moment I met him. But love was the reason that I was in that situation, that I was in that family and a part of that family. And on the days when I wasn't feeling very loving or I wasn't feeling loved, I just kept my eye on the ball of what my intention was, and that I was choosing to be there on that day. Every day was a choice, and I was choosing to be there. And I think, this is a good place for me to add that, my sons, and I have two of them, and I've only talked about the one that was the difficult one, but he also had an older brother. And my boys now are in their late 30s. One of them is 34 and the other one's 39. And both of them have said that they respect Bob more than anybody in this world. And the reason
that's lovely.
is because, and they said the reason is because through all of the hell that they put him through for the years that they did, he stuck it out. He stayed and he stuck it out. And they said, that means more to them than anything in the world. And they both said it to him and to me. Mom, we respect him more than anybody in this world because he stayed. He stayed, and we tried to run him out. My youngest son actually said that. I tried to run him out. I gave it everything I had. And he didn't.
Wow.
He stayed. He said, and I respect him so much for that. And I think, if parents know that, it's almost like you have to respect the person that goes through these things, and they just stay, and they do stick it out. Kids learn from that.
Wonderful.
They see it when they get older, and they look back and go, wow, you did. You stuck with us.
That's beautiful. That's really great. So Bob must really feel vindicated by all of this.
Oh, you're right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's great. Well, we're coming towards the end of the program, and I'm wondering if people are interested in this area, what would you suggest that they do or resources that they should consult? And Marney, you want to take this one?
Sure. There's actually some excellent articles on a website that Kim and I, are contributing authors to, and we've done a couple of the articles, and some other experts in the area of parenting have contributed some articles on blended families, and the website is called empoweringparents.com. And also on our website, we also have some blogs and some resources, including our parenting book and CD programs. And that website is therapiesinapod.com. And Kim does some phone consultations, and she's happy to work with families. She's worked with families all through the nation, actually, on different family issues, parenting issues, ranging from substance use within a family to oppositional defiant behavior disorders. And also, if you're experiencing issues with your blended family that are really, really beyond what you feel like you guys are able to manage on your own, I would suggest finding a counselor that specializes in blended family issues and just addressing some of those things like expectations and making sure you're on the same page.
That sounds very smart. Well, the resources that you mentioned, the empoweringparents.com and therapiesinaPod.com, are on the website of the Texas Conflict Coach as well, so you can find them there if you didn't remember them. And I'm wondering if you could give us a final message this evening at the end of the program. Kim, do you want to start?
Sure. I used to call my mother a lot. And when the conflict got really, really heavy at my place, I would call her crying and just, Mom, I don't know what I'm going to do. And my mom would tell me this. She'd say, Kim, you know what? In 1 year from now, you're going to look back at this and you'll probably laugh. In 10 years from now, it's going to be one of the stories that you all sit down and laugh about. And she was right. I have to tell you, just this past Thanksgiving, we sat down, and that is exactly what we did through the whole Thanksgiving dinner. My sons told one story after the other of way back when they were young and the things that some of them that I didn't even know about. I was horrified, actually. I'm like, you did not. You did that? And everybody just cracked up laughing. It was, we got through it. And we look back at it now, and we laugh about it. My sons have children of their own. And their children were sitting there saying, you did that? You did that? You did that to Grandpa Bob? Oh, my God, And so we did. We laughed about it, and she was absolutely right. And so on a final note, it's this, these things too shall pass. And when things are really, really tough, try to see some of the humor in it. Stop yourself and think, you will probably be talking about some of this at a Thanksgiving dinner. But lighten up. Just lighten up. This has to do with people's emotions and feelings, and they pass. They change. People work through them. And so I guess that's what I would leave people with.
Oh, that's wonderful. Marney, anything that you want to add for a final message?
Absolutely. Sense of humor imperative. And support system, as Tim said. I often called my best friend and said, oh, my gosh, I'm not going to make it. And she would say, hang in there, hang in there. And, I would say that step-parenting is one of the most challenging things I've ever taken on in my life. And I would also say it's, in the end, one of the most rewarding.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, thank you both so much for this program. We really appreciate both your personal experience and the perspective that your professional experience puts into it. So thank you.
You're very
Marney
welcome.
and Kim.
And thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Texas Conflict Coach. We hope you enjoyed the program. You can find all of our podcasts archived to listen at your convenience at texasconflictcoach.com or download the podcast at iTunes or Stitcher Radio. You can also become a Facebook fan of Conflict Connection or Twitter me at TX Conflict Coach.